Okay, today we are on the Kuf Dalid Amid Aleph. Fantastic. Okay, so we have a Gemara that started with Rava making Havdalah, and he said it sounded like 4 Havdalahs. He said Amad Makadosh L'chol, Kuf Dalid Amid Aleph. He started with Hamad Makadosh L'chol, Ben L'choshev, Ben Yisrael Amim. Then he said B'yem Ashila Sheish Yimei Amasa. So he asked him, "What are you doing? Either just say one, like Rebbe said. Rebbe says Hamad Makadosh L'chol, and then he says, "Oh, I hold that you either say no less than 3 or no more than 4, or no more than no less than 3, no more than 7." So he said, "Okay, so but you said 4. So what are you doing?"
No more than 7.
Yeah, but good. So good kasha. So Rashbam and Tais both have a pshat, and in your kasha is hey, you can't do less than 3 more than 7. So you said 4. That's in between 3 and 7. What's the problem? Good kasha. So Rashbam seems to say, like, if you're going for the least, so then do 3, and if you want to do more, so then do the most. Like, why are you only doing like 4? Is like weird. Tais says a little differently. Take a look at this. Umar loy tlasam v'loy sheva Umar. Umistama. You can assume oy gimel oy zayin tiknu keneged shum davar. If they said 3 and 7, then it was probably corresponding to something. Shalay lifchais elahoisif. Keda amr be'atchilas, like we find layivchais mizayin, and that's keneged the zayin rakim. V'hamoitzev lo yosef al yagimel, don't do more than 13, because that's keneged the zayin. And the Shisha Avirim, the 8 air spaces between the 7 heavens. So Taisus is saying that if they said 3 and 7, they probably have a reason for 3 and 7. So 4 wouldn't mean anything. Okay, that's the kasha. So he answered them, oh, you know why? Because Ben Yom Hashvi, L'Sheshes Yimei Amasa, I'm not saying as another Havdalah. That's just to say something similar to the chasima of the bracha, which is Hamad ben Kodesh L'chol, close to the chasima. So I already said I sort of veered from the beginning. I started with Hamad ben Kodesh L'chol, ben L'choshev, ben Yom Hashvi. I'm sorry, ben Kodesh L'chol, ben L'choshev, ben Yisrael Amim. So I'm not going to jump to Hamad ben Kodesh L'chol if I just said ben Yisrael Amim. Like we got to go back to you got to say something similar to the chasima before you finish the bracha. That's why I said that one. So really, I'm doing 3, and I added 1 just to say me'ena chasima samach lechasimas. That's where we ended off yesterday. We're on the top of Kuf Daled, 4 lines down, and we're up to Upumpadisoi. Upumpadisoi Amri Upumpadisa. They said me'en pesichasan samach lechasimasan. Really, you should say that they disagree with Shmuel. And you don't say something similar to the ending before the ending. You should actually say something similar to the beginning before you finish, before the ending. Okay. So the Gemara was like, my beinayu. You know, most brachas with the last line is something that's similar to both. So where do you have an nafkamina? My beinayu. The Gemara says, you know when there's a nafkamina? Ike beinayu on Yom Tov shechaliyos achar hashabbos. What we call that? Binyak Nahaz. When Yom Tov falls out after Shabbos. So we say a bunch of Havdalahs. The Chasminon ben Kodesh LaKodesh. There we say a Chasima of ben Kodesh LaKodesh. So now, Man de Omar me'ein psichasan samach lechasimasan. So if you're of the opinion that you have to say something to the Pesicha next to the ending of Baruch Atah Hashem Ben Kodesh LaKodesh, Loi Boi Lameimar, it wouldn't be necessary to say Ben Kedusha Shabbos, the Kedusha Yom Tov Hivdalta. You wouldn't have to say that Havdalah, because that's me'ein the Chasima, that's talking about Uman de Amar me'ein Chasimasan Samach LaChasimasan. But if according to the one who says that you have to say something similar to the chasima before you say Ben Kodesh LaKodesh, so then it would be necessary to say ben kedusha Shabbos the kedusha Yom Tov Havdalah, because that is what is similar to the chasima. The chasima is ben kodesh l'kodesh. So you got to end off with something that's similar to that. You can't end off with some other. You couldn't end l'chol before you say before you make the bracha ben kodesh l'kodesh. Okay. Now there's a beautiful thesis here. So he goes through the nusach. It's not exactly the way we have it. I mean, I'm sorry. It is. His count is a little difficult, but let's see what he says. Boy lamemer ben kedusha Shabbos the kedusha Yom Tov Havdalah. Okay. This is the Aknahash. Shol Reb Ephraim as Rabbeinu Tam. Rabbeinu Ephraim was a Rishon, asked Rabbeinu Tam, Lama nahagu ha'olam. What's pshat? That the olam is not l'haisev v'loymar, to add so many things in the Havdalah of Yaknahaz. Right? V'loymar, and they say, V'zem hashvi misheshes yemei hamasa kidashta. Havdalta v'kidashta es amcha Yisrael. We start talking about the Jewish people. B'kedushasecha. You've separated and were makadosh your nation Yisrael with your kedusha. The ein zeleme ein pesicha. This has nothing to do with the pesicha. V'leime ein chasima, and it has nothing to do with the chasima ben kodesh l'kodesh. So what are we adding these things in to the Havdalah of Yaknahaz? V'heishav le Rabbeinu Tam. Rabbeinu Tam answered him, Mishum chibas hayoim, because of it was a chiba to the day. Harichu, so they lengthened the Havdalah. Oimar pamachas me'ein zayin Havdalahs. So one time at least we should have this the 7 Havdalahs that's mentioned here. So at least one time, and it's mitay chiba, and I think many people have. I don't know, maybe it's just me. Many people I think have a certain chiba to that bracha of Yaknahaz in general. Right, making the Yaknahaz is like it's a very it doesn't come out so often. And it's, you're making Havdalah, and this whole big, the Kidashta, Havdalah, Kidashta, people mess up, they read it wrong. It's like Kidashta, comma, Havdalah, Kidashta. But people, I don't know, I think people like to say, and it is Mitachibas Hayoim, Harichu, they made a long Havdalah, so at least once in a while we get to say the Me'ein Zayin. Okay, now he's going to count them for us. Okay, where does that go? Bein Kodesh L'chol, Echad, one Havdalah. Then we got Ben Or L'Choshech Beis, Ben Yisrael Amim Gimel, Ben Yom Hashvi L'Sheshesh Yemei Hamasa Daled. Okay, he counts that one. Ben Kedusha Shabbos L'Kedusha Yom Tov Havdalah. First of all, what does that mean? Between Kedusha Shabbos to Kedusha Yom Tov, you separated. In what way? So Pirush, that means Shabi Yom Tov Shari Midi to Eichel Nefesh. You're allowed to do Eichel Nefesh, so the Kedushas Yom Tov is less than the Kedusha Shabbos. Ve'ez Yom Hashvi Misheshes Yemei Hamasa Kidashta. The 7th day is different than the rest of the 6 days. This is interesting to note. Taisa says, Hainu Choyla Shel Moyed. This is not talking about the regular 6 days of the week, because we mentioned that already. This is talking about Chol HaMoyed. Dishari Davar Ha'ovid, because now a davar ovid is mutter, ub'Shabbos it's aser, and even on Yom Tov it's aser. Okay, zeh cholok Shabbos and Yom Tov, v'hi Havdalah achas. Now, so this is the chiluk between Shabbos, Yom Tov, and Chol HaMoed. He counts that as all. The difference between the kedushas of Shabbos and Yom Tov and Chol HaMoed, that brings us to 5.
How would Yom Shvi v'Sheish Yemei Ma'aser referring to Chol HaMoed? I think you're saying that, but
why is that Chol HaMoed? Why are we comparing this? I mean, it's a little. You should really be comparing. It should be comparing Yom Tov.
Right. The Russian he's saying is Chol HaMoed
is Sheish Yemei Hamasa. Right, but it's in the good aura. Okay, okay, so that brings us to 5. Then we add in another thing, and we say Havdalta v'Kidashta as Amcha Yisrael b'kedushasecha, you separate and sanctified your nation Yisrael with your kedusha. So Tais says this is referring to two kedushas, shtei havdalas, because the Gemara is going to say this later on. It's bein kehanim leviim v'Yisraelim. There's a chiluk between Yisraelim and Leviim, and then Leviim and kehanim. So that's another two kedushas. So that brings us to Zion v'havim me'ein chasima, and this is beautiful. This is me'ein the chasima. What's me'ein the chasima? The fact that you differentiated between Klal Yisrael. That's being Kodesh l'Kodesh in different levels of Kedusha in Klal Yisrael. Okay, now that's now. I want to mention one other Nakuda here, and that is that in Atachein Antanu, right? When we're not the Gemara just told us, according to Shmuel, we say being Kodesh l'Kodesh ben Allah Chodesh l'Kodesh Yisrael Amim. That's the Havdalahs. And then we add in, again, we say, Ben Yamashila Sheshimei Amasa. That's just to be Me'ein Chasima, Samach Le Chasima. To say, Baruch Atah Hashem, Amad Makedesh. So, says the Rosh, when I'm saying Atachein Antanu, when I'm not being Messiah with Baruch Atah Hashem, Amad Makedesh L'Chayil, so L'Chayil, there'd be no need to say the Nusach of Ben Yamashila Sheshimei Amasa in Atachein Antanu. Because I'm not saying the chasima, and it doesn't count as a Havdalah. No, forget Yantav. Regular Motzei Shabbos in Atachein Antanu. Regular Atachein Antanu. Look, you should only have to say the three Havdalahs. You shouldn't say Ben Yamashila Sheshes Me'amasa, because that was only added because you have to say Samach L'Chasima Me'ein the Chasima. So the Rosh says you don't say it. Our gear said we do say it. The Barbanel says it's because we don't want to be made like a light. We made a nusach for Havdalah, so we don't want to change the nusach like a light plug. So that's why we throw it in there. Yeah, it's a good kasha, and the Torah says you're right. You don't need to say it, but that's the lashon of Havdalah, so we keep it. We keep that same nusach for Atachein Antanu. Okay. Gufa. First word on the line is Gufa. Here we go. Amr Belazar, Amr Baishia. We've mentioned before that if you're doing less, you don't do less than 3. And you don't do more than 7. Is that really true? You don't do more than 7? A person should say Havdalah, or says Havdalahs on Motzei Shabbos, Motzei Yom Tov, Motzei Yom Kippurim, Motzei Shabbos L'Yom Tov. Yaknahaz, Motzei Yom Tov, L'chol HaMoed. You also say Havdalahs. Avaloi b'motzei Yom Tov l'Shabbos. But when you're going from Yom Tov into Shabbos, there's no Havdalah. Why not? Why don't you say Havdalah? So Rashbam says because Havdalah is you're leading out. Generally, you're leading one person. You're leading out. In this case, you're leading out Yom Tov, and how Kiddush is welcoming Shabbos. She says when you have a governor leaving town and you have a king coming to town, nobody's going to escort the governor. Everyone's going to greet the king. So that's when Yom Tov leaves, we don't make Havdalah is the Indian of Levaya, of escorting out the governor. So in the place of Shabbos, he has no place. So there's no Havdalah. Correct. We're going, meaning we're going to a higher kedusha. That's the Indian. So we're not being Havdalahs. All the Havdalahs are always going from from more kedusha to less kedusha, except from Yom Tov to Shabbos. So that's the real that's the real the side of the mashal that the Rashbam game is that when you're going into more kedusha, you don't make Havdalah.
You're allowed to do Havdalah on Friday night. Only Friday night.
Right. Meaning that's what Kiddush is. Kiddush is going from a lower level to a higher level. Right. That's what Kiddush is. So I don't need to make Havdalah. Havdalah means I'm separating from a higher level to. But
no, but normal Friday night is not Kedushas Hayom on Friday. Yom Tov, there's a Kedushas Hayom. There is a Yom Tov.
Okay, so the question is, I got to repeat. I was asked to repeat the questions because the people listening don't get to hear the questions. The question, as remembered, the question is, why wouldn't you make Havdalah from Yom Tov, which is Kodesh, into Shabbos, which is another level of Kedusha, but we make a bracha ben Kodesh to Kodesh, and there's Havdalah. I'm separating between these two. So I think the answer is because that's sort of what Kiddush does. I think that's what you're saying also. Kiddush also is a Havdalah. Right? It's a separation, but it's in the positive sense. So, that's the other reason to say it is because it's an inyan of Levaya. Right? Meaning, in terms of Kedusha, you wouldn't say a Havdalah because I only model from a higher Kedusha to a lesser Kedusha. In terms of escorting out Yantif and that inyan of Havdalah, so when I'm going to a higher Kedusha, I'm not escorting, I'm not busy with the lower level of Kedusha anymore. I would phrase the question in another way. I saw the Emek Bracha asked the following question. He asked, according to the Rambam holds that Kiddush on Shabbos and Havdalah on Shabbos are both D'Oraisa. Right? That's D'Oraisa. It's the same mitzvah, meaning it's a mitzvah. Zach Hashem Shabbos Lakache is Lakache b'Knisasei u'b'Yitziasei when it starts and when it begins and enters. He's medag that the Rambam seems to hold that he makes a lashon that the mitzvah of Kiddush on Yantiv is the same as Shabbos. So he says that means that if it's the same thing, so the mitzvah of Kiddush on Yom Tov and Havdalah on Yom Tov should also be D'Oraisa, according to the Rambam. That's his dik in the Rambam. So if that's true, how do you not say Havdalah on Yom Tov? Like what kind of svara are you saying? It's a mitzvah D'Oraisa. How do you not what do you like? You bring a nice mushal. There's an apirkas leaving. There's a melech coming. Very cute. It's nice. But you have a mitzvah d'oraisa. How do you just not do that mitzvah? So I'm not sure what his teretz was exactly, but I think that kiddush is always I'm distinguishing Shabbos from the day before it. That's what kiddush is. It's this way. So by making kiddush, I'm distinguishing between the Yom Tov, a lower level kedusha, into Shabbos. I don't have to say Havdalah. You don't need. It's not that you don't need it. It's superfluous.
There's no Havdalah for that Yom Tov.
Correct. Doesn't need a Havdalah. The Havdalah is the fact that I'm making kiddush now. I'm saying that Shabbos is different than you. You're a lower level kedusha. I'm going to higher level kedusha. That's that's a good word you're saying, David. Okay, so those are the kedushas. That's all the kedushas that we got. And when we don't say kiddush, we're back to this memory here. Okay, says Haragil, someone who is an expert, a baki, harbe. He should say a lot of havdallas. The she'eni ragil, and someone who is not he's not used to saying havdallas. So just say one. So here you want to say many is vague. Maybe that means 7. But here it's explicit. You could just say 1. So that's a kasha on Shmuel. Shmuel said, it's a kasha on Rabbi Shia, who said you can't do less than 3. Here you see you could say 1. Now, I don't know why we had to jump over here. That we already had Rebbe said you could say 1. We said on Kuv Gimel and Beis. So Yesh Emrim, because here it's a brisa. That was a memra from Rabbi Yehuda, the name of Rav, in the name of Rebbe. Here it's a brisa, so maybe it's a stronger kasha coming from a brisa. Any event they want to answer Tanoihi. It's a machlekes Tanoim. Then Rabbi Yochanan said, "Binon shel kedoshim," the son of the Holy One, or the son of holy ones. Omer, he says, Achas, you just have to say 1 Havdalah. V'nagu ha'am le'meshalish. The minig is to say 3. Now, who is this Binan Shal Kadeshim? Man Nihu Binan Shal Kadeshim. Who got such a lofty title? Says the Gemara, Reb Menachem Bar Simai. It was Reb Menachem Bar Simai. Why was he referred to as Binan Shal Kadeshim? V'amai Karolei Binan Shal Kadeshim. Answers the Gemara, Delight Istalkel B'tzurasa Dizuza. He was such a kaddish. He wouldn't even gaze at the tzura, the image on a coin. Okay. What's the grace mile of not looking at the image on a coin? So Taisa says he's got he does a different gash. He says he's like it's sort of like a mamanavshach. If this is like, are you allowed to look at it like if this was an Avodah Zarah, that image, so nobody can look at it, right? And if it's not an Avodah Zarah, so then what's in it not to look at it? So
These kings and queens of images
yeah,
themselves as gods.
okay.
Appointed by God.
So then it's kasha. Then it should be it should be also for everybody to look at that if it's an issue of a desire. So one teretz. Is this let me start with the Zuzah. I don't know what choices that is. Like 5th, 2, 4, 5. Says Arab Meir Kai. The Amr Meir Kan. It says in my comment parak Ki Kan Nika Nafshe de Rabbi Nachman bar Rabbi Simai. When he died, Ishtanu Kolzel Tzilmanaya Vahavu L'Mechzalia. What does that mean? Pirish Chalak and Belay Surah. All the coins that were around, a miracle happened and they all went flat. There was no surah anymore to them. That's one point. So I thought somewhere else answers that even if it was Avodah Zarah and be ushered to everybody, if it's something which is so common, when people look at it, they don't flinch from it. So then like they became rugged to it, so there wouldn't be an isser. And he was machmer on that. That's one teretz. What's the other one? I forgot the other teretz. That was one. Now, why does it call him Benon Shel Kadeshim? Why does it call him the son of someone who's holy? If he himself was holy, wasn't about his. So Taisa says, "V'toyle kedushasei ba'aviv shegam aviv hayakadosh." He would refer to himself. I don't know if he would refer. People refer to him. When people said you're such a kaddish, he said, "It comes from my father. It comes from my father." So that's what he was known as, Benon Shel Kadeshim, even though it was really he who was kaddish. Okay, Gewaldig. Now, Shalach le Reb Shmuel bar Idi. It could be it should say Shalach lehu. He sent to the base medrash. Hananya Achi, my brother Hananya Oimer Achas. He says to make one Havdalah, not 3. Says the Gemara for the Salachas Kavasei, the halacha does not follow him. The halacha is that we say 3 Havdalahs. Okay. Amr Bishur ben Levi. Hamavdil tzarach she'emer me'ein havdalais ha'amuris b'teira. When you're saying Havdalah, you should mention the Havdalahs that are mentioned in the Torah. Okay. In fact, the Gemara, is that really true that you're supposed to mention that all the Havdalahs are things that are in the Torah? Let's see. Says the Gemara, Meisei, I'll ask you a kasha. Seder Havdalah's head. What is the order of Havdalah? So, Aymer Yisei Hamavdil Makadosh L'chayil. Bein Or L'chayshech. Ben Yisrael Amim, Ben Yom Hashvi L'Sheish Yimei Amasa, Ben Tamei L'Tahar, Ben Hayam L'Charava, Ben Mayim Halyonim, Ben L'Mayim Tachtonim, between the lower waters and the higher waters, Ben Kehanim L'Leviim V'Yisraelim. Okay, those are the Havdalahs. Hamuras V'Choisem, and how do you end off? You end off Baruch Atah Hashem Seder Bereshis, Seder Bereshis. Why would you say Seder Bereshis? Like Akash Baruch Hu orders the world, orders creation. The Shabbos is when Akash Baruch Hu started to be Messiah of the world. Okay. Another opinion is you don't say Seder Bereshis, but rather you say V'Acher Reimrim B'Yoytze Bereshis. Akash Baruch Hu formed the world. That's the opinion that Akash Baruch Hu formed. Not only did he create everything on the first day of creation, he actually formed everything on the first of creation and only put them in their relevant places throughout the days of creation. Rabbi Yehuda Chaysim Mekadesh Yisrael. He says you should sign off on Havdalah that Kadosh Baruch Hu is Mekadesh the Jewish people. Why would you say that? The Rashbam says the 5 lines down, the very wide lines, and right in the middle, Mekadesh Yisrael Mikol Elamai. HaKadosh Baruch Hu sanctifies the Jewish people from his entire world, Shiatza, that he created. I'll read that differently. Mikol Elamai Shiatzar, from the entire world that Hashem formed, like Kiddush El Yisrael, he only sanctified the Jewish people. Well, if he appears there, and according to this, it makes sense why you would say this on Motzei Shabbos, because this is when HaKadosh Baruch Hu formed the world. And we're saying, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you formed the entire world, and the only thing you're Mekadesh is Yisrael. Gewaldig. Says the Gemara, Vim Isa. Now, that was the brisa, beautiful brisa. What's the kasha? What was the meisvei? Vim Isa, if what you're saying is true, that when you make Havdalah, you should say Havdalahs that were mentioned in the Torah, Haben Hayam Lecharava, like Sivabei. Havdalah. It doesn't mention anywhere Bein Hayom Lecharava in the Torah that there's such a Havdalah. I mean, all the other ones are in the Torah. The pasuk, right? Ben Tamal Torah, Ben Kodesh, Ben Kodesh, and that's a pasuk. Lahavdil Ben Kodesh, Ben Achol, Ben Atamir, Ben Atar. That's a pasuk. Vayavdil Elikim Ben Ar, Ben Achoshech, Vayavdil Ben Hamayim. I go what it says. Vayavdil Ben Hamayim. So all those are psukim. But this Hayam Lecharava, between the sea and dry land, doesn't use the lashon of Havdalah. So therefore, that's not true. You mean, and the Brisa says you can say that. You're gonna like this answer, Mati. Says the Gemara, Sama Mikan, erase it. Sama Mikan ben Hayam Lecharava. You don't like it? Get rid of it. Okay, fine. In fact, the Gemara, Ihaki ben Hayem Hashvi l'Sheish Me'amasa Nami. That's also not written anywhere in the Torah. There's no Vayavdel ben Yem Hashvi l'Sheish Me'amasa. Says the Gemara, you're right. That's not one of the Havdalahs. That's Me'ein Chasimahu. That was just there, so you should be Chaysa. Meaning, if you're a 3 guy, if you're only saying 3, so it gave you that after 3. That's what it says. And then in the Eden, because if you only say 3, that's where you would put in. Okay. So now, but if that's the case, so one second, we threw out Yam Lecharava. We're not counting Benyama Shila Sheshes Masa. So how many do we have left? Says the Gemara, Habatzachada. Then I'm only down to 6. Answers the Gemara, Habatzachada. You're down 1, but like a Shev, you don't have 7 anymore. Answers the Gemara, Amri. We answer Kahan Leviim Yisraelim Tremi Lininu. Kahan Leviim Yisraelim are 2 things. Leviim Yisraelim, there's a distinction. Tichsev, like the pasuk says, he at that time Havdalah Hashem Sheva Halevi ben Kahanim. I'm sorry, Sheva Levi. Hakadosh Baruch Hu separated Sheva Levi from amongst the Jewish people. That's one kedusha. And then ben Kahanim and Levim, between Kahanim and Levim, Hakadosh Baruch Hu separates again. Tichsev bnei Amram Aaron uMoshe v'Yavdel Aaron la'Kdisha Kodesh Kodashim. Where's that pasuk? In Divrei Yamim. Okay, so Aaron is separated to be the Lagdisha Kodesh Kodashim. So we see Kahuna distinction between Kahuna and Leviah. Okay, great. Now, let's just take a look. I don't remember what it said, but there's a Kishmaka Tesis over here. There's the last tesis on the page. Benyama Shila Sheshes Me'amasim in Chasimehi. Right, you're only saying that Me'in Chasim. So the first part of the tesis says what I just said. I mentioned. Hachanami have a matzla mifrach halay ksiva. You could have asked that this is not written in the Torah, but the Gemara asks, but it's asking that it's, or the Gemara just points out that it's Me'in Chasim. I thought it was a kasha. Maybe I read wrong. But like Penelel b'seif. So why don't you mention it at the end? Pirush Rashbam Dishana Acher Gim Havdalas. We mention it after 3 Havdalas. The Kishaini Omer Ra Gim Havdalas. Because if you're only saying 3 Havdalas, have a Samel Chachasima, then that would be considered Samel Chachasima. Okay. Yim Taimar, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda. Ulirav, Techas Mekadesh Yisrael, according to Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, who we mentioned already, and Rav, that we're going to mention in a minute. They would be Chaysa Mekadesh Yisrael, Heichi Havya Me'in Chasima. What point is, what are we saying here that's Me'in V'Chasima? Adrabah, Kehanim Leviim V'Yisraelim, have a Tvei. I'm sorry, I skipped the line. They say Mekadesh Yisrael. Hechi have Me'in Chasima. How is that Me'in Chasima? Meaning ending off Kaham Levim Yisrael, and then you end off Mekadesh Yisrael. Why is that Me'in Chasima? So it says, Adirava, Kahanim Levim Yisraelim have a Tvei Me'in Chasima. V'yesh Lemar Debain. I'm sorry. If you're going to end, okay, I read that wrong. If you're ending Kahanim Levim Yisraelim, then Mekadesh Yisrael is a great chasima. But if you're only saying 3 and you're going to end off, you're going to end your chasima in chasima is Benyam Ashil Sheshes Miyamasa, then how is Mekadesh Yisrael in the chasima? That's his kasha. V'yesh Loimar How's that? Because by differentiating between Shabbos, I'm saying that Kadosh Baruch Hu has made us holy with his mitzvahs. And he only gave us Shabbos. They're actually downgrading. We're saying that there's a distinction in Kedusha between Kahanim Levim and Yisraelim. It's not a bracha of Mekadesh Yisrael. You're saying that this is not everybody's so Kaddish. El Lahakol. Shekam b'Kedushasa Mekahanim Levim lehavim ein chasim. To say Mekadesh Yisrael when you just mentioned Kahanim Levim and Yisraelim is actually off. Because there you're saying that Yisrael is not as Kaddish, right? That's the main chasima for the bracha we say on Yak Nahaz. We answer the last thing we talk about is V'Kedashas Amchi So B'Kedusha Secha, which is talking about the Kahan Levim Yisrael, and then we make a bracha of Mamad and Kodesh LaKodesh because that's mamish the bracha. The main chasima is that there's a distinction between Kahan Levim Yisrael. But when we're making if you were to make the chasima of Mekadesh Yisrael, so you shouldn't talk about Kahan Levim Yisrael because then you're not being Mekadesh Yisrael. There you should say the distinction of Shabbos of that Kadosh Baruch Hu gave us the Shabbos because that shows the kedusha of Kal Yisrael. Okay, says the Gemara back at the bottom of the Gemara, four lines from the bottom. Michta my chasim. So how do we finish off? What's the chasima? Rav Amar Mekadesh Yisrael. Shmuel Amar Hamad ben Kodesh L'chol. Okay, now that's a fair machlekes Rav and Shmuel. But listen how bad it gets here. Lied Allah Abaya. Abaya would curse the Item Rav Yosef, or Rav Yosef would curse Ahadarav. If somebody was Messiah, Mekadesh Yisrael, he'd curse them. Why? He cursed them. Why? What's so bad about finishing off Mekadesh Yisrael? It seems to be like a nice piece. So a few theories are given. The one is that you can say Mekadesh Yisrael on Motzei Shabbos. It's like a Gnei to Shabbos. You're talking about the Kedusha of Yisrael after Kedusha of Shabbos. But the most intriguing one I saw was that who said we don't want to talk about Kedusha of Yisrael on a Sunday. Right? Sunday is not a good day. Sunday is it's Christian. All right? It's right. It's we don't want to talk about Mekadesh Yisrael. We don't want to talk about Kedushas Yisrael on Sunday because of the minim. That was a teretz given, and that explains why Rav did it. I'm sorry. The Gemara said before that Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda also of Mekadesh Yisrael. So, but that was earlier times. That was pre Yeshka times. So Rav is already, Rav was the nephew of Rebbe. So he's mamish around that time. So that's why later on, if you do him like Rav, he didn't like that because it's giving too much credence. That's a pshat from in the back of the Gemara, Blaz Meir Horowitz. Okay. One more Gemara. Says the Gemara, Tana, we learned, Mishmei de Rabbi Shua ben Chananya, Kol HaChesed Mekadesh Yisrael, V'hamav ben Kodesh L'chol, Ma'arich L'yamav V'shneisav. If you take the extra time to say both, so then you'll get Yarichas Yam V'shanim. But the Gemara says, but the halacha is not like that, because we hold you don't do two chasimas. You only do one chasima, so we got to pick one, and we pick Hamavdil ben Kodesh L'chol. Thank you for coming late tonight. Tomorrow I'm back on regular time.